Hi there. So this video is a follow-up to the Supreme Court video. This one is about jurisdiction, and jurisdiction refers to the authority to hear or review a case. Okay, the authority to hear or review a case. And every court in the United States has one type of jurisdiction, either original or appellate jurisdiction. The Supreme Court is unique in that it has both types of jurisdiction, okay? It almost always, however, uses appellate jurisdiction. So let's talk about what they are and why the Supreme Court almost always uses appellate jurisdiction. So original jurisdiction means that a case is being heard for the very first time in a court, okay? So like if you get a traffic ticket or something like that, a speeding ticket, and you decide you want to contest it, you would go to court and you would tell the judge, you know, this was the situation, The first time that you go to that court for that, for any situation is a court of original jurisdiction. And so let's say you don't like the decision that the judge hands down. Or that the jury hands down. In that case, you can appeal your case, and that is where appellate jurisdiction comes from. So courts with appellate jurisdiction are not the original first layer court, first instance that you take your case to court. This is a second court, it's higher up, and so you appeal to a court that has appellate jurisdiction over that particular situation. So maybe it's something like a family issue or child you're trying to get child support or something like that, then you're going to go perhaps to a higher level. Or maybe it's like a murder trial and something really scandalous and you didn't do it, and so you're going to appeal the result. So once you appeal that result, then you are going to a court with appellate jurisdiction. And courts with appellate jurisdiction do things a little bit differently. They do not try the case again. What they do is check the merits of the case in the lower court. So they review what happened in the lower court instead of retrying the case. And so they will decide one of two things. The first thing is they will say, you know what, you're in the right, and they will overturn the original verdict. So whatever the decision was in the lower court where they had original jurisdiction, then you can have the appellate court might look at the facts of the case and say, oh, okay, so the court below us with original jurisdiction did not act under the law. And so they acted in a way that violated your constitutional rights. And so in that case, you would not have to pay the fine or the punishment or whatever the situation was. So appellate jurisdiction can lead to an overturning of the lower court's decision, or they can uphold it. And if they uphold that lower court's decision, that means that whatever happened in the lower court is the decision that the appellate court would also come to that conclusion. So you can, if you don't like that decision, you can appeal higher and higher up the ladder until you get all the way to the Supreme Court, if it's a federal case, or a state Supreme Court, if it's a case within a particular state. But eventually you're going to have to stop. The Supreme Court, there is no higher court. So if if your case goes all the way to the United States Supreme Court, then there is no other route of appeal. It's called the court of last resort. And so the Supreme Court almost always takes court cases in the appellate form. That means that they have been heard in lower courts before. They can take cases in their original form. It is extraordinarily rare, okay? And heads up, a lot of people send traffic tickets and that kind of thing to the Supreme Court. First of all, that's not going to happen. They're not going to take that case. What kind of cases is the Supreme Court likely to accept? Because they get to choose the kinds of cases that they're going to take. It's not like the traffic court, which is required to hear your case about a speeding ticket. They have broad selection in terms of about 10,000 cases that are sent to the Supreme Court each year. Very few of them actually go for the full hearing or a per curiam decision, which I'll talk about in the next video. But the ones that they do take are typically, they fall under one of 5 categories. They're constitutionally based, so they have some significant constitutional right that's being violated. That's what's alleged to them, based on federal laws or regulations, okay? Generally, if you've got a problem with a law that's federal, that was passed by Congress, you're not going to go through your state courts. you're going to go through the federal court system. And so it might make its way up to the Supreme Court. Anything dealing with a treaty, okay? So if you think a treaty violates your constitutional rights, then you can take that to the federal, through the federal court system to the Supreme Court. A treaty, by the way, is an agreement with another country. It has to be negotiated and confirmed by the Senate and the President. So a treaty itself is a pretty significant deal. Anything to do with maritime issues. We've all heard of the whole thing about where you can take somebody out on a boat 3 miles out and murder them and you won't get in any trouble. That's not true. That's not true. Don't do that. Don't murder. But if there are issues that are on the high seas, then the Supreme Court, or waterways within the United States, then the Supreme Court would have jurisdiction over that type of case. And they might also accept border crossing legal issues. And these are not the kind of border crossing typically we think of border crossing at the southern border that the United States shares with Mexico. No, not that kind of situation. In this situation, we're talking about states' borders. So if you say you commit or you're accused of committing a crime in South Carolina and then you travel to North Carolina and you're caught in North Carolina, like the Charleston church shooter several years ago, for example. He committed acts of terrorism in a church, murdering 9 black parishioners, and then headed north on 76 and ended up in Shelby, where he was caught and arrested. So once he crossed that state border, it's no longer a state issue, it's a federal issue. And so it can work its way up to the Supreme Court if that is a case that they decide to take. Okay, for the most part, we're not seeing these salacious kind of cases where that make a lot of headlines go to the Supreme Court in terms of like one person gets murdered or something horrible like that. Generally, cases that the Supreme Court is going to accept are ones that are heavily impactful on all citizens or all residents in the United States. And so that's why you see cases that will take a long time to wind through the court system. Cases on healthcare, campaign finance reform, medical situations. So there's a lot of different more broad issues that the Supreme Court will accept cases on.